Hey everyone, welcome into Up to the Second College Football, Episode 8, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We do it for the Saturdays, and we want to remind you guys to have fun out there with Academy Sports and Outdoors. All right, a great show today. Ralph Russo from the Associated Press. We got the coaching carousel, what's going to happen at LSU, a little bit more on LSU. Matt Moscona joining the show. He's got his eye on everything going on, plus what's going to happen this weekend against Ole Miss. We've got previews from Tennessee and Bama. How about Oregon, UCLA, Notre Dame, and USC. We call it Up to the Second College Football. Hope you like it. Here it is. All right, now it's time for our big guest of the week, and we got a lot of storylines to get into with coaches moving, getting fired, and what's going to happen there with Ole Miss taking on LSU. A lot of big games to get into, and we'll do that with Associated Press's Ralph Russo, who joins the program. Ralph, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Nice to see you.
So obviously the Ed O news is really catching a lot of steam out there. We dealt with it in College Station with the Jimbo after effects. Just what are your thoughts on how things are going to shake out there at LSU?
Yeah, I think they applied a strategy that I think we're seeing more and more in college football, and that is get rid of them before they win a bunch of games and it becomes a harder decision. Where LSU goes from here, I think the idea of swinging for the fences, right? And that's why Jimbo's name came up and the relationship with the AD there. That all makes sense, but you also still have to sort of be a little realistic here. Again, I never thought Jimbo seemed realistic. That didn't seem like a realistic move for LSU. Dabo Swinney's name came up, right? But is that truly realistic? LSU's a tremendous job. I can make an argument that it's, top 3 or 4 type jobs, but these jobs aren't in a vacuum, right? Yes, standing alone, if we look at all the factors, it's a great job, but where coaches are in their careers and where their wives want to be and things along those lines, those are important. That's important factors. Where LSU goes from here, I think James Franklin's name will come up. I think that his name will come up for USC, and he may end up deciding to stay at Penn State in the end. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Lane Kiffin here. Sometimes it shouldn't be this way, but sometimes these things can go as the wind goes, right? Coach has a great year. All of a sudden his stock rises. Coach loses a couple of games. Do we really want the guy who we just beat? So I think that there are some elements there. I think it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. And I think there will almost inevitably be at some point during this search, a feeling that it has become a circus, right? Because that's what the way these things end up being set up. At some point, somebody's going to say no, there'll be some information leaked, and it'll feel a little bit like a circus, but that's what happens when you have a coaching search that will span 2 months.
Ralph, we don't know if Lane Kiffin's happy at Ole Miss or not, but I feel like the destination jobs that are out there that I could see him at are LSU, obviously, and the University of Miami. Do you see those as fits, especially Miami with their history of just, being braggadocious and whatnot?
Yeah, to a certain degree, with Miami's situation, I am starting to wonder, they have been out of the national picture for long enough that will coaches look at Miami being in the ACC and think, we can't do it like that anymore. Like it was a moment in time that captured a moment in college football, but the landscape of college football doesn't allow Miami to be what it was. I do sense that there may be a little of that going on. As for LSU, no, that one makes a lot of sense. Again, that whether that makes sense for LSU to be interested in Lane, listen, Lane has become one of the most popular people in college football, right? Everybody kind of loves Lane right now. But I reflect back on this, and this is not to say Lane isn't a good coach, but you think about his tenure at the end at USC, he was like the most hated man in college football. He was a punchline to a certain degree. So it's interesting to me to see like how his image has changed when, he spent a couple of years as Saban's assistant, which was good. He had a couple of nice years at FAU, and now he's in year 2, where I think his record is 10-7 at Ole Miss. I don't have it off the top of my head. So look at the full body of work. And why is Lane Kiffin such a hot name? I think Lane Kiffin's a hot name in part because he's got a great I wouldn't say great, but an interesting personality. But it's interesting to see how the temperature has moved on Lane from being a punching bag when he got fired at USC to now everybody wants Lane.
So everything seems to connect back to Lane, the LSU job, perhaps Miami, and Tennessee's game this past weekend with Ole Miss. What did you think of that circus and just how it all unfolded and just the way some people were defending the fans?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I hate to be the one who is like sort of waving their hands off at all the fans, Tennessee fans, as if they're this monolithic group. But at a certain point, you have to sort of look around and say, like, why are you people feel so entitled to cause a mess? Like I understand your football team hasn't been good in a while, and I understand that is super frustrating. But why do you feel that entitles you to then sort of insert yourself into these situations in a way that is just not allowable through common decency, right? Whether it's this or the way things went down with the coaching search and they, sort of hammered Greg Schiano unfairly. So ugly situation. But again, I'm very hesitant to sort of want to throw them all out and sort of make these broad statements. But I do wonder, I keep going back to this idea of entitlement. What makes you feel so entitled that just because your football team has had a few tough years, you get to break things?
Right. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the way college football this year has gone. We have so many ranked teams that keep falling. Can you make sense of what we've seen this year with Bama falling early and all these ranked teams here? What are we on week 8 and things keep changing?
Yeah. So just a little context. 47 ranked teams have lost so far this season. 25 of them have been to unranked teams, including, as you guys know, maybe the biggest upset of the season. I think the biggest upset of the season, Texas A&M beating Alabama. Now, Texas A&M is very good, and I think that they will be a ranked team, maybe even a New Year's Six team by the end of the year. But certainly in that moment, right, that did not look like that was particularly possible. I don't know if there's a reason for this. I don't know if I can come up with a cohesive, like, why are we having this sort of chaos? Before the season started, I thought, well, some of the really good teams have quarterback issues. So maybe that opens up some volatility. But if you kind of dig down deep on that, like Alabama's issue isn't quarterback. Bryce Young is terrific. Ohio State's issue isn't quarterback. CJ Stroud is pretty damn good. Now, A&M's had some quarterback issues because of a new guy, B, the backup. And Clemson certainly some of their issues are tied back to quarterback, but I don't know if that's a consistent theme. I don't know if there is a consistent theme of this. All I know is I've been enjoying it. Like, it's really fun and really cool, even though the end of this journey has been sort of twisting and turning and kind of wild. I do sort of suspect that we will get to a familiar conclusion to this journey.
All right, I want to follow that up with then Cincinnati. How good is Cincinnati, and can they really be in the college football playoffs and make some noise?
I do think that they are very good. Now, are they the top of the SEC good? No, they're not that. But there are several. They got more than a few NFL players on that roster. I think that's a good way to sort of sum it up, right? There are legitimate NFL players, a couple of high round draft pick guys, potential high round draft pick guys on that roster. I think within the context of what we're seeing in a chaotic year, where Clemson has pretty much already eliminated itself in the ACC, and as much as Oregon had that nice win against Ohio State, Pac-12 is kind of teetering a little bit. It's always going to be about what happens around Cincinnati more than what Cincinnati does to a certain degree. I think Cincinnati will probably close the deal here and go undefeated. But if you have some volatility already in the ACC, the potential for a lot of volatility in the Pac-12, you have these 4 really good teams in the Big Ten that could have a potential to knock each other off. We'll see what happens with Oklahoma in the Big 12. They may have sort of found something here in Caleb Williams, which keeps them above the fray. I guess there's and you already have Alabama having sustained a loss. So maybe if Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC title game, it eliminates the possibility of 2 SEC teams. Long-winded way of me saying you can see, without necessarily stretching your imagination, a situation where Cincinnati's unbeaten. There's a bunch of 2-loss champions around, and the Bearcats get their chance.
Ralph, last thing for you. We talked a little bit earlier about the A&M victory over Alabama. How do you think they've gotten back on track after looking like a lost team for a couple of weeks?
So you guys know this team better than I do. You watch every single play, right? So from my 30,000-foot view, I think, and it certainly helped to play Missouri, right? It certainly helped to play Missouri there. Some commitment to the run game here, making things a little easier on Calzada. And the offensive line seemingly taking a step forward. I think even I had pretty high expectations for A&M at the beginning of the year. Thought they could be a New Year's Six team. Thought they were the biggest challenger to Alabama. Probably underrated the issues of transitioning at quarterback and some of the transition on the offensive line. But I think that if you found an identity on this offense, which is Spiller and A-Chain, then I think that should carry you going forward, because I think the defense is still good, and we'll see what happens with the quarterback position. But I kind of do wonder if finding an identity here and having an offensive line develop might be the most important thing that will carry Texas A&M forward.
100% agree with that, Ralph. Thanks so much for your time, my friend.
Very welcome. Have a great day.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, bikes for the whole family are just a click away. Buy online at academy.com with our free in-store assembly. Your next set of wheels, plus helmets, pads, and water bottles will be waiting for you at our in-store pickup counter. Get to the fun faster with our in-store pickup and free assembly at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, guys, one of the big games this weekend, Ole Miss, as they welcome LSU, fresh off the big Coach O announcement out there. From an LSU point of view, we've got Matt Moscona from After Further Review there on ESPN in Baton Rouge. Matt, how are you doing, my friend?
David, I'm good. Thanks for the invite, as always.
Yeah, my friend. So I guess how crazy of a week has it been, really a season has it been for those folks there at LSU?
Yeah, well, not altogether unexpected. I think we talked at media days, and I told you, look, if Ed Orgeron was 7-5, he was going to be fired. It was pretty clearly expressed to me this offseason. So when LSU lost to UCLA, this news felt inevitable. It was really just a matter of when and how it would transpire. And really, after that Auburn loss, it was over. And when they got pounded at Kentucky, it was just a matter of how they were going to make this announcement, just the formatics of it. So it has been certainly an up and down season for LSU with a lot of down, but the news of Ed Orgeron's firing is not altogether unexpected.
Who are the likely candidates, in your opinion, that will get the calls?
Well, you all know Scott Woodward is a big game hunter. I mean, he does not aim small. The really interesting part of this dynamic is that LSU has a new university president, William Tate, who's the first Black president at LSU. And it's been pretty well conveyed that he has a strong desire for LSU to hire a minority candidate. So, how that obviously cannot be the only criteria, but it certainly is not going to exclude anyone from consideration for this job. I think James Franklin at Penn State is a very obvious name that you're hearing. Lane Kiffin, Bill O'Brien, names that I heard early in the process. I think Luke Fickell is popular among a lot of boosters. I don't know that they can pull him out of Cincinnati, though. He's a Midwestern guy that likely stays there. And Mel Tucker is a name that you're hearing lately. Tons of ties. He coached at LSU under Nick Saban. He's been at Bama, Georgia, head coach most recently at Colorado State, presently at Michigan State. I think that's the short list right now.
Now, I know I didn't hear your report, but I saw it on social media that you said that Jimbo was really not a candidate there. Is that because of the deal he got, because people understood that he didn't want to leave, or were they really just not interested in Jimbo?
So you all know this very well, that LSU went down this road in 2015 with Jimbo when he was at Florida State. And they got so far as an agreement in principle. But that deal fell apart in the 11th hour, and it was the way that it was handled with Jimmy Sexton and LSU administrators at the time left such a sour taste in the mouths of some admins and boosters that it was expressed to me, David, that LSU had better not even consider picking up the phone to make that call. Jimbo's a fantastic coach, and I look candidly, I was very much in favor of LSU bringing him here in 2015 and possibly in 2016. But it's just something that Jimbo, I thought, perfectly expressed all the reasons that he's happy in College Station, and I think he'll do great things there. But it's one of those things where I don't think LSU has any interest in unearthing that conversation again.
Can you kind of express to our audience the relationship that Coach O has with LSU? I mean, some people believe that, yes, obviously this was a rough year and he's had some issues going on in his personal life, but he is still tied to this program. And I think in his contract, he's got to still make appearances moving forward.
It's so bizarre. He's got to make he's obligated to make at least one appearance per year for the next 4 years. And my guess is, look, that's if there's a 2019 championship celebration, he can't opt out, for lack of a better phrase. He's got to be there. But Ed will always have that feather in his cap of 2019, which is on the short list of the greatest college football seasons ever. It ended badly. There's no doubt. He didn't handle success well. And, this break isn't as amicable as it appeared with Scott Woodward and Ed Orgeron sitting next to each other at that dais on Sunday night. LSU's giving Ed Orgeron his full buyout instead of firing him for cause, because they have no desire in making this a legal battle. It's more, here's your $17 million, play nice for the next 6 weeks, and then good luck to you in the rest of your life. I mean, that's more what this is among Ed and administrators. Fans are a little bit torn. I think most fans appreciate Ed Orgeron for 2019, but also understand that what we talked about, that this was inevitable and probably the right time.
So let's talk about the product on the field. Has LSU figured things out this past weekend? It looked like it, at least if you're talking about from an offensive standpoint against Florida, or is that just a one-night performance?
Ty Davis Price ran for 20 yards against McNeese, FCS McNeese. And he set the LSU single-game rushing record against Florida. It makes no sense at all. Like, David, I have no idea with this team. They have been so impossible to predict all season long. But technically speaking, they ran some counter plays, which I think better suits their offensive line. If you want to get technical with it, I'm curious this week, now that Ole Miss has seen that on film, no doubt, DJ Durkin's a good defensive coordinator. He's going to see that, and they're going to defend against it. So does LSU have a counterpunch? My guess, based on what I've seen from Jake Pete so far this year, is they won't. And Florida put up 500 yards and 42 points with 4 turnovers. I mean, if they protected the football, they might have scored 70. So the win was one. Like, anytime you beat Florida, man, it's celebration time around here. But I winning mass deficiencies sometimes, and this LSU team still has plenty of them. And I think a good goal for this team right now is beat ULM, steal one more SEC game, and get to a bowl.
Can they beat Ole Miss in a shootout?
No, I don't think they can beat Ole Miss. Well, then again, I think they beat Florida. So it's a Saturday in the SEC, and I guess anything can happen. But if Matt Corral is playing, I don't know how LSU goes into Oxford and wins that game. I think realistically, the best shot LSU has remaining is a home game against either Arkansas or A&M. And man, with the way the A&M defense plays when they're right, I don't know that LSU moves the football against them. So Arkansas is probably LSU's best shot at another SEC win. They'll beat ULM and see if they can get one against Arkansas. And they still got the Bama game mixed in there as well. So there's going to be some ebbs and flows here over these final 6 weeks, and probably more lows than highs.
Matt, I want to go back to the coaching thing for one last question, because you mentioned a name that I heard as a candidate a while back, and I heard you mention again. And as a longtime Texans, or Oilers before that, fan, the name Bill O'Brien has a bad taste in my mouth. Is he a legit candidate, and do people really think he can win in Baton Rouge?
He was one of the first. When LSU lost to UCLA, I fielded calls from boosters who had been contacted about paying a buyout. And at that time, I was given 2 names. The first 2 names I heard were Lane Kiffin and Bill O'Brien. So since then, I've heard the others that I mentioned. But Bill O'Brien does make a lot of sense. Having coached for Belichick, having coached for Saban, he inherited a disaster at Penn State post Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky, and actually did a fantastic job in that situation. I think with the Texans, you can make an argument he was a pretty good coach. He was a terrible general manager. And some guys are just more suited for the college game, and I think Bill O'Brien is that. David, one other thing to keep in mind is the last 3 head coaches at LSU have won national championships. And 2 of them are on nobody's short list of great football coaches in Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. The value of the soil at LSU, the recruiting base, the resources, the only Power 5 in a talent-rich state makes this a desirable place because you've seen the last 3 coaches win national championships here. The only program that's won more in that time frame since 2003 is Alabama. So, there is a belief here that you almost can't miss. If you can win a championship with Les Miles and Ed Orgeron, as long as you keep this thing on the tracks, you almost can't miss to be a competitive program.
Matt Moscona, we appreciate you, my friend.
Always my pleasure. Thanks.
Need a new grill? Academy Sports and Outdoors is the destination for your outdoor cooking needs. With our free in-store assembly and pre-assembled grills and smokers, buy online at academy.com and pick up in-store. So keep those grilling plans at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, now it's time to talk a little Alabama. They got back on track last week against Mississippi State, and now they're taking on another pretty good offense there in Tennessee. They can throw the ball, and the fans can throw things as well. We'll talk some Bama with our Bama insider, Tony Tsoukalas, here from BamaInsider.com. Tony, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's finally getting to be fall weather here in Tuscaloosa, so I'm just kind of enjoying that.
Yeah, man, the weather here in College Station is fantastic. So help me understand how Saban does it, right? So after a loss, he's pretty unbelievable. And to me, not that he ever wants a loss, because I know he's still a little salty about it, but I feel like he uses those as his biggest teachable moments.
Definitely. I think that, that loss against Texas A&M could be a turning point in Alabama's season. They're going to use that as a rallying point. Nick Saban even this week said that he got a bruise on his arm following the celebration, the on-field celebration, and it reminds him of that loss. And, so I don't think he was ever going to forget about that loss, but, that's definitely a moment that the team, Nick Saban and the team can kind of rally behind. I think it's important, though, to see how they continue that. It's real easy to respond 1 week against Mississippi State. Let's see how they, respond moving forward against Tennessee, against LSU, against Arkansas. I think that's going to really show the character of this team. But as far as, the first week after a loss, I think that was a pretty good step for Alabama.
Hey, do people like Brice Young again last week? 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, he looked good in the A&M game, except he was rattled a little bit. But are people there in Tuscaloosa liking him again?
Anyone that didn't like Brice Young is out of their mind because, who do you trade him for? Well, what quarterback in the nation do you trade Brice Young for? There's not very many. Maybe Matt Corral, but that's about it. So anyone that was upset about Brice Young didn't know what they were talking about, but I'm sure that they're a lot happier with this performance. He's pretty flawless again against Mississippi State. You said he was rattled a little bit against Texas A&M. He overthrew some passes, sure, but he still set, I think that was his biggest passing yards out of any game this week against Texas A&M. So he really hasn't had what I would call a bad week yet. So if you're not happy with Brice Young, you're probably not an Alabama fan.
How do they plan on defending Tennessee, who has that nice offense? They're really moving the ball well. They can score a lot of points.
Yeah, Jordan Battle this week said that it was a lot like the Ole Miss offense in terms of the tempo and how fast Tennessee can get. And so I think that's just knowing your cues, being prepared. There's a lot of mental things that you can do to kind of make sure you're ready to move that fast as a defense. I think playing against an Ole Miss offense earlier this season would probably help. Obviously, this Tennessee offense is good. It's not as talented as that Ole Miss offense that Alabama faced. So we've seen Alabama been able to handle things kind of like this. They've got to be ready. They've got to, get their A game back, and they can't just rest on their laurels after this big win against Mississippi State. But I think, when it comes down to it, I think that they should be ready. And I think this defense, it at least looked like the one that we were advertising at the beginning of the season, more so than the one that, got torn apart by the Aggies.
Bill O'Brien's come up on this show a couple of times for different reasons. A, because there could be interest in the LSU job, but also because I feel like Nick Saban was kind of poking fun at him this week in the press conference when they were talking about changing plays. Can you kind of set the table there, what happened?
Yeah, I don't know if he was poking fun at him as much as he didn't want to throw him under the bus. I think Nick Saban knew that, Bill O'Brien on that 3rd and goal from the 1. I think that, I don't think you have to be. It's not too much of a secret that might have been a passing play because Alabama originally came out of an empty before sending Brian Robinson, beside Brice Young out of the shotgun, and Nick Saban called a timeout. Then after the timeout, Alabama comes out in 2 tight end with a fullback, so kind of like a jumbo package, and then they run the ball to Brian Robinson. Bill O'Brien got a lot of criticism for. There was one series against Texas A&M where they threw three times and didn't get the touchdown on a 3rd and goal from the 3. I think Nick Saban saw that play and said, no, we're gonna run the ball. And I think actually if Mississippi State had stopped Alabama would have ran it again. So I think he didn't want to say that Bill O'Brien that he changed the call on him, but I think it's probably a pretty good guess that that's what he did.
That's what Bill O'Brien does. What's the game plan for Mississippi State? Or let me rephrase it. What can't happen against Mississippi State?
Against Tennessee?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Yes, against Tennessee. What cannot happen against Tennessee?
I just think it's a focus thing. There's nothing that Tennessee's going to be able to do that, can really hurt Alabama over the course of a game. It's not even like I 2 weeks ago, I think I said something similar about A&M, but like the talent differential between Tennessee and Alabama is totally different than the one between Alabama and Texas A&M. I think it's just going to be a case of Alabama needs to keep this momentum going and prove that it wasn't just a 1 week, remedy, that they really have turned things around. I think that comes down to focus. Talked about on defense, they can't, let Tennessee catch them off guard. And then on offense, they really just got to keep everything going the way it has been. Things looked pretty good. Brice Young, as we talked about, was moving the ball pretty well through the air. He was even moving the ball with his feet a little bit. And then the running game has kind of come along. Roydell Williams has kind of stepped up as that backup running back behind Brian Robinson. Both those guys have looked good. So I think it's really just about focus and keeping things together and kind of building off that big win against Mississippi State.
Appreciate you, Tony. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
this should be a good one. We've got number 10 Oregon and UCLA. This could be a huge game for Chip Kelly, by the way, and we know he's got ties, obviously, to Oregon. With an Oregon point of view, let's talk to Dylan Reubenking from Ducks Digest. How you doing, Rube?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I just dropped a Rube on you like I've known you for a long time. So, but we'll go more with first names, Dylan. Is this a game that Oregon has been thinking about because of the relationship there with Chip and how he's got UCLA, well, at least we thought in the beginning of the year, playing much better?
I think so. I mean, you look at what this team has gone through under Chip Kelly for UCLA, and they've definitely had a kind of a redemption year. They had a couple down games, but I think this is definitely going to be on the mind for Chip, especially playing against that Oregon team. They almost got the win last year in the COVID year, so it's definitely going to be a big game for both teams.
Can you explain the relationship between Chip, obviously who's now at UCLA, but the fan base there at Oregon? Is there still love there for him? Is he considered now just a rival because he is in the Pac-12 elsewhere?
I think so. I mean, it's been a little bit since he's been the coach. Obviously, he left for that NFL job, which I think a lot of people saw coming. But it has been a while, and now that we've played the Ducks have played UCLA since then, I think most people kind of just see him as a rival now. But there is still kind of that love for the most part. I don't think there's any bad blood there.
How good of a fit is Mario Cristobal there with the Ducks?
I think he's a great fit. Coming from Alabama, you really know that he pushes that discipline, that hard work, that grit every single day. And, you've kind of seen it with this Stanford loss about pushing, adversity and kind of fighting through that. And then even against Cal with fans booing the offense. So I think it's a perfect time for him to be the coach of this team right now, based on their hopes for the college football playoff and beyond.
There was a time where it felt like Oregon was a for sure shoo-in for the college football playoffs if they just took care of business. They're outside looking in right now. How much are they paying attention to what's happening with all the chaos that we're seeing here in college football?
Yeah, it definitely gives you vibes from 2007, just all the craziness that's gone on over the last couple of weeks. There's still a chance, even though they're sitting at number 10 in the AP poll, but they control their own destiny from here on out. They just have to win out for the most part. Even though this could be a year that a 2-loss team gets into the playoff, I think that if you see that, it would be an SEC team. But Oregon for sure is watching everybody, especially the SEC.
How are they doing in terms of injury? I know they were hit early with the injury bug. How are they looking for this game heading into UCLA?
Getting healthier. That's a big focal point. Alex Forsythe was out last week against Cal. He's expected to be a full go, the starting center. Mace Foon has been dinged up all year, one of the outside linebackers, and he's going to be full go as well. Kayvon is looking like Kayvon of old, and even Joe Moorhead, the offensive coordinator, is going to be back in the booth and calling plays after missing the Stanford game due to an illness. So getting healthier, it's definitely looking it's looking good for them on both sides of the ball.
What happened with their OC, Joe Moorhead? I know he was out for a little bit. How's he doing? Is he going to be back this weekend?
Yeah, he's doing great. He had a non-COVID illness. They revealed it shortly before the Stanford game. He was home. They were still kind of collaborating on the game plan for that game. And then against Cal, he was back in the booth. A lot of people were trying to find him on the field to see if he was back, but they announced during the broadcast that he would be up in the booth. And I believe that's where he's expected to be against UCLA.
Dylan, what is the recipe for a victory against UCLA?
I think it's in the run game. UCLA is really good defensively, and they really pound the rock offensively as well. You saw it last year when UCLA played Oregon. They only held the Ducks to 88 rushing yards, which was completely unlike what Oregon had done the previous first couple of weeks. And now with CJ Verdell out, you have to rely on Travis Dye. They have to pound it with him. They definitely saw it against Cal. He had 145 rushing yards. I believe he already had 100 by the second quarter. So really being able to control the line of scrimmage and get, Travis Dye going is going to be a big focal point, and stopping Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown and DTR. Those guys can really damage a defense if you're not careful. So I think the run game on both sides is going to be the biggest focal point in this game.
Dylan Reubenking, we appreciate your time. Check them out at Ducks Digest. Thanks, man.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, another big game this weekend. You've got 5-1 Notre Dame taking on 3-3 USC. Are the Irish back on track after that bye week? Let's discuss with John Brice of Irish Sports Daily and FootballScoop.com. John, how you doing?
I'm great. I appreciate you having me on the show, and never a bad time to talk college football.
You got that, my friend. Let's start off with some of the chatter out there. All right, so there's this LSU job, and nobody's directly linked Brian Kelly to it, but those are one of the names that, hey, when they talk about LSU going for a big fish, he's one of those names. Do you think Brian Kelly would have any interest in that job, or very happy at Notre Dame?
I think he's happy at Notre Dame. I think after breaking Knute Rockne's record earlier this year with his 106th career win for the Irish, that it would take, first of all, a place far less dysfunctional than LSU. It's frankly a cataclysmic mess right now. And then also, I just think it would take something entirely different, a new challenge for Brian Kelly. I could see Brian Kelly eventually maybe seeking to transition into the NFL, but at the college level, LSU might be right now a better job and an easier job in a lot of ways. It's not a more prestigious job than Notre Dame. And so Brian Kelly's had fabulous success here in South Bend, and I don't see that being a fit between those two parties at all.
Does he have to win a national championship to cement his name there in history beyond what he's already done?
My wife's a South Bend native. She actually works for Notre Dame, so I've gotten kind of indoctrinated into the history a bit more in recent years since we relocated up here from Knoxville. I'm an SEC guy, born and bred. But one of the interesting things about Notre Dame Stadium is outside of all the gates, they've got statues of their national championship coaches. Well, you don't get a statue if you're not a national championship coach. So based on those qualifications, yeah, I think the next step for Brian Kelly is to win a national championship at Notre Dame to enter that conversation with Lou Holtz and Knute Rockne and Ara Parseghian as perhaps the greatest coaches in Notre Dame history.
All right, so let's talk about the quarterback spot after the bye week. How's Jack Cohn doing? How's Tyler Buckner looking? Is he going to get more action? And break it all down for me.
Yeah, it's the breakdown really is that Notre Dame's offensive line is so very un-Notre Dame-like, especially for what that unit has been from 2017 on. Everyone knew there would be a significant step back after what they lost off last year's team, especially multiple guys that were early round draft picks. But it's been a little greater step back than anyone thought. There have been some significant injuries. They've started, I think, 4 different guys now at left tackle. 2 of those 4 were true freshmen, and true freshman Joe Alt will continue to start at left tackle moving forward. So that all ties into the quarterback situation, obviously. Jack Coan has done some really good things. He's tended to play his very best football early in the game when I believe Tommy Rees does a really masterful job of scripting things and scouting the opposition and setting that offense up for success. Then defenses adjust, and I'm not saying Notre Dame doesn't adjust, but defenses adjust, and most noticeably, I think they can start to pick up on some holes in that Notre Dame offensive line. And then there have been some late game situations where Jack Coan has been absolutely brilliant. Some guys that work on the Notre Dame campus with my wife have taken to calling him Jack Montana because of his late game rallies. Obviously, that's an unfair nickname, but it's an amusing one. But he's good early. He's really good late. He's never rattled, never, ever rattled. I think that's key, especially when you have so much youth around you. But I do believe they're going to get Tyler Buckner more and more involved. I think they need to. He's obviously what they view as the future of the program, and he's the potential type of player that can get them not only into the playoffs where they've been frequently in recent years, but to maybe finally win a playoff game and advance in the playoffs.
John, let's talk about that defense. Creating turnovers is what they've been doing. How have they been so efficient and effective doing it?
Yeah, I just wrote a huge feature story last Friday for Football Scoop on Marcus Freeman that I spent, about 6 weeks on, talking to everyone from Jim Tressel to high school coaches in Cincinnati. And it's the way he gets those guys playing with such freedom and energy. And he would tell you in a heartbeat, if you had Marcus on your show, he would say, look, my defense has more structure than people believe. But he gets those guys playing loose before the snap. They're able to move around. They're able to pick up things on their own. And they have some freedom to make some changes as the play is unfolding and to just play more reactionary football and trust their instincts and trust their athleticism. And so I think that's why they don't have a dominant player in the front seven like they did last year in Butkus Award winner Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now they do have who I think is the best safety I've seen in college football since Eric Berry in Kyle Hamilton. But he's on the back end, and they do some great things with him. But really, it's just the freedom they play with, the attack mode that they play with. And when I was working on that story on Freeman, I found a really interesting anecdote that he likes to use with his players. And he tells them, hey, it's adapt or die. It's adapt or die. And they very much are growing in their ability to adapt on the fly rather than die.
Hey, let's talk about USC. They've, I believe, lost, if my memory serves me correct, 4 in a row there in South Bend. Will that trend continue? And is that rivalry still something that gets people juiced up?
It is. It's definitely still a great rivalry. Look, NBC, as we all know, gets its pick of doing whatever it wants to with Notre Dame home games. And this has been a Notre Dame night game, one of the two, typically, every year that I've lived up here since 2017. So third year in a row, just since I've lived up here, or third time in a row, that it's the NBC primetime game. It always does great numbers because of the West Coast pool and because of the Notre Dame attraction. I still think it's a really good rivalry. USC has not upheld its end of the tradition in recent years, and that's hurt. But, before Brian Kelly, Notre Dame wasn't really upholding its end of the bargain in the rivalry as well. So it's a big-time rivalry. I do believe Notre Dame will win. I think USC is too up and down, too inconsistent, and obviously dealing with coaching turnover already. The first big boy to make that move in this college football season. That's a lot to overcome. They've played better away from home. They have the talent. If they had everything together and a lot to play for this season, they absolutely have the talent to be a nightmare for Notre Dame. But I like Notre Dame at home. I like, again, the fact that Notre Dame is so steady and unflappable.
John, we appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you so much.
Always, anytime, guys. I appreciate the chance to visit.
All right, that does it for Up to the Second College Football, Episode 8, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Hopefully you liked it. You can subscribe to it. You can comment on it. We'll see you guys next week.